So hello everybody, welcome to the next show. My name is Petr, I'm a studio lead at Accenture Song and responsible for the design in Prague. And with me today is Matt Webb, and pleasure to have you here on the show, and I'm really looking forward to our session.
Thanks for inviting me.
And if you can introduce yourself to the audience, would be great.
So I'm Matt Webb. I have the world's smallest product invention studio. I like to call it product invention because when you're creating new things, we don't really know what the process is, but let's focus on product, called Acts Not Facts. And I have about 20 years experience in inventing new products with new technology from a design perspective for some of the world's largest brands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like this inventions. Like me personally, I also saw like an old invention, the little printer. It was also all over in Prague and was very kind of like close to me, and I was like, oh yeah, this little piece with a face, with a is so small but also so human. Like how this story came out.
Well, I mean, so really I think the credit for Little Printer, which is maybe, kind of 10, 15 years ago, goes to the other incredible people in the studio I was at the time, called Berg. But I think it kind of came from a few different places. One is that we were moving from a period of the internet being kind of trapped behind glass to being kind of out in the real world. And we're kind of through that transition, I think, mostly now. But at the time, it was very new. The second thing was, how are we going to relate to products that talk back? So, usually things in the world are inert, right? But when you fill them with a network, they become alive in such a way. And how do we do that in a way which doesn't, feel like it, confuses us, or like how does it kind of fit into our psychology? And a really good way of doing that is to give it character. And weirdly, I think we kind of, I have lots of feelings about kind of character as a way forward to relate to technology, but we're seeing more and more of that with AI at the moment. I think the third thing was the opportunities in hardware. So again, back in 2010, the idea that a small company would be making hardware was, unthinkable. That was something for the big folks. But, with China opening up, and I'll tell you the big thing about China opening up was actually Google Translate, being able to kind of email directly with the factories. It made it possible for us to kind of manufacture. And all of those things came together in this kind of device, which was a cross between maybe a Tamagotchi and a receipt printer, to bring information in the world, and that was Little Printer.
Cool. What was the reception of it? What was the story then when you put it to market and show it?
It was really good. So we had a great reception from it, and as a studio, I think it was very important for us as well, because what it got us into was designing other machines that would talk back to you. So, for example, Nespresso. If you are a Nespresso drinker, you'll know that some of the machines now are Bluetooth connected, and they connect to an app, and you can order more coffee through the app. So that was our studio, and that relationship came out of Little Printer and talking about the network being inside things. But if you think about what that means, it's actually a really complex device, because whereas a smartphone or a computer is individual use, you have an identity with it. You can press a button to make a purchase. A coffee machine is a group use item. What happens if somebody walks by it and just presses buy now loads of times, but it's somebody else's credit card which is attached to it? How do we have group use machines that are attached to credit cards in the world? And I think that was an important question then. It's still an important question now as we start getting into things like spatial computing. What do we mean by group use environmental computing? And that was a little foray into that kind of world.
Okay. Can you tell us, like, jumping to your talk on the next? Can you introduce the talk a little bit? What we were talking about?
Yeah. So I've been really interested recently. I think, like everyone is how are we going to interact with AI? I think you can loosely, with the AI boom over the last couple of years, with like large language models, GPT-3 first of all, then ChatGPT, you can loosely divide it into two areas. I think there's programmatic AI, where we use it to make computation and connecting systems faster, really big. Secondly, it's how we use it as individuals. How do we interact with AI? And the ways we use it at the moment are, to me, kind of unsatisfying, and we should explore other ways. The way I choose to explore other ways is by making what I call software sketches. So you start sketching, you make something in software that you can interact with and use. And when you use it, it tells you what it wants to be. And then you make the next iteration, and then you make the next iteration, and so on. This is different from the way we worked with digital over the last decade. So over the last decade, we've been pretty sure what technology can do, right? And our way of what we're doing when we're exploring is we're thinking about user needs, right? We're optimizing a product, and we do that with post-it notes, right? Or by iterating the software, because we all roughly know what's going to be. With AI, we don't know what it's capable of, so we can't do that kind of process. And the way we sort it out is we roll our sleeves up, we get our hands dirty, and we think through making. And to be honest, this is my favorite point in the technology S-curve. So it was really an argument to do more of that, plus some computing history.
Yeah, it's to me like I haven't witnessed myself the invention of the movie camera, but it always reminds me that like when the people started to play with the technology, they were doing kind of like quirky small things, but they then learned what it can become. And I think we are kind of like in the similar setup now.
And a lot of that kind of early understanding about what a movie was done in Paris, in a magician's theatre.
Yes.
So it was all about kind of, how do we do magic tricks? And I think these kind of things are exploring the edges of the medium. And I think this is an important thing about AI, right? Like Nat Friedman, AI investor and the ex-CEO of GitHub, talks about AI as a capability overhang. There was a leap when large language models came out that he says will take 10 years for us to digest, which tracks right for me, okay? Like when the web came out, the World Wide Web came out in, 1990 was invented. The first commercial web browser, Mosaic in 94. And it took another 4 years to realize that we could put a credit card number in a text input field and press submit and do e-commerce, right? 4 years to realize we could do e-commerce. I was buying stuff in 97 where the web page was a catalog, and then you had to email your credit card details to someone. It took 15 years for software as a service to displace box software as the primary business model for business software companies. 15 years, right? So Friedman says it's going to take us 10 years to digest what happened with AI. And I think that's about right? At the moment, we are imagination bottlenecked. We don't know what we can do with large language models. And so this is the way we figure it out.
Yeah, what I like about your experiments and also the way how you see things, and I would like to know more of what is driving you on that, is that I think that's society is kind of like used to these like big technological terms like AI will change everything next year or already this year, everything what we do, or blockchain previously and stuff like that, on a big scale, big words, very fast. Whilst you are bringing to it this small and slow kind of digesting and going through the fabric of like with these micro interactions and these interfaces which you are building. Was it always like for you kind of natural to do these micro delightful things? Or
it's interesting, right? So I'm influenced a lot by my colleagues at Berg from the Little Prince time, who came from a discipline called interaction design. And so interaction design is a very particular kind of design which focuses on that moment of touch between the human and the material. And what is that like? What contexts are happening? How does it make you feel? But what it's not is about understanding like the user journey or the user goal, right? And when you focus on that moment of interaction and you understand what makes it different and what makes it feel, it's a very generative place to be in. You develop those moments of interaction and you assemble them like Lego bricks into different experiences, which were not the same as where you started. So there's this kind of dialogue between you and the material, which helps you invent. And that's what I learned from, sitting in the same room as interaction designers. I found that very, very inspiring. So I think that's where I got it from. Also, I think it is, there are many ways of reaching new ideas, right? And if I have to choose between, spending all my time on whiteboards, drawing diagrams, or just getting my hands dirty, guess which one is more fun, right?
But are you also using in your process like some of these more kind of like classical, traditional, like design techniques? Like, are you doing a usability testing of them, or you don't need to because?
No, I think there is space for all of those. Like, all these techniques are important, but I go with the one that I understand. The things I use to broaden my way of thinking is I take ideas from other fields. And this is one of the things I really love about the design world, is you're able to go as far off in any direction as you like, but you have to land on something that you can touch, right? And it's the same as working in, I don't know, like, you can go into like the world of science fiction, wherever, the imagination can take you anywhere. So the places that I find really inspirational are computing history. You can tell from my talk. I think there were many roads not taken in our path from, the prehistory of computing in like the 1890s through to today. And it's interesting to look at those other routes, and we can use those for inspiration. I like to look at kind of small s sociology. How do we exist in groups? I care a lot about the group of 6 to 12 people, the group of friends or the team. And I like looking at the physical world. So I don't just mean kind of like architecture. I'm not an architect, take inspiration from it. But also like, how does our cognition understand, our peripheral awareness, things like that. So I think all of those things, I try and immerse myself in those different areas. And those end up feeding into the sketches I make. Even if those sketches do look really playful and odd sometimes.
In these like small groups, which you were just talking about, like there's this big idea of a multiplayer web, which you are working very often with. Can you describe it a bit more?
I think the best way to understand this is via experience. So I'm very lucky as part of Acts Not Facts. I say I do product invention. Part of that is I'm doing invention with a company called PartyKit, which makes low-level internet infrastructure to make the web real-time and multiplayer. And they're very kindly supporting this kind of very exploratory work. One of the things I'm exploring is how can the web feel more alive? Why, when I go to a web page, can I not tell there are other people there? If I go to a web page which is busy, it should feel busy, right? If there's something coming up, I should know that something is coming up. When I look at a hyperlink, if it's noisy at the other end, some of that noise should filter through. So I've been working on that, right? So I've been building prototypes using this new infrastructure to do that. So if you go to my blog at the moment, you can see the cursors of everybody else on that web page just behind the text, as if they're behind frosted glass. Hyperlinks are badged with how many people are at the other end. And once you start doing these things, there's also one feature which shows if people are highlighting text. That happens. Just live. Doesn't preserve it. It's just if people are doing that at the same time. Actually, funny experience about that. I went to the web page and I noticed somebody highlight some text. Just, while they were thinking. I do that, right? When you're thinking. And so I highlighted the sentence below them. They highlighted the one below me, and I highlighted the one below them. And so we went down, down the entire page. And it was this really kind of funny, playful interaction. And once you experience a web page which is alive when other people are there, everything else feels inert and lifeless. And it's not, why isn't the internet more alive? The question is, why did we let it be so sterile?
So how do you project it like to the future? Like there are already kind of like mass tools like Figma, but also like Google Docs and all these kind of like working documents, collaborative already. Do you think that every tool will be having some collaborative functions in that multiplayer?
I think there'll be a spectrum. Obviously you don't want to know how busy everything is, on everything all the time, right? That's not if you're going and dealing with your HR records, you probably don't want to like see the fingerprints of everyone else who's been kind of looking at that, but it should be an option. So things like Figma and Google Docs are incredible because they're kind of paving the way. But the problem is, I think, is that all of that has been very, very hard. dealing with CRDTs, which is the underlying data structure behind something like Google Docs, has so far been difficult. Making it real time, you start hitting some very fundamental computational limits and squared limits of like how much traffic is being sent around. There are new technologies now. PartyKit is just one of them. There are many which are making it easy to experiment with that. And what's nice about this kind of trend is we're beginning to see the artists getting involved. And once people who are artistic, creative, or expanding the edges start getting involved, they start thinking, well, what does it mean for us to be in the same space? What does interruption look like? What does following look like? What does it mean to be with just one or two people? Should I know where my friends are, or should there be some kind of like hidden moments? What else could we do with it outside the realms of work, right? And so I think what we're saying now is let's experiment to see what kind of patterns are going to be common, and then we can start building it into all of our software. I mean, the moment I'm excited about is when that reaches our smartphones. But I think there's some, the web is a great place to figure out the patterns first.
Okay. There is this, there's this leitmotif of still kind of like a character of or a humanistic thinking in your work. Also when you work with AI and in this kind of like you give them roles in this multiplayer web. Can you describe it a bit more, like how you imagining these personas?
Yeah, so one of the things I was showing in the talk was about could interacting with AIs be more like interacting with your colleagues or your teammates? I call them NPCs, non-player characters from the kind of the gaming world. Because you think, let's say you're writing a document and with your team. At some point, you're going to want to riff with your colleagues and spark new ideas. At some point, somebody might step in and help you fact check something, or you might at someone to check a particular way of phrasing. And at the end, you might have a kind of a copy editor or somebody to work with style. Those are different people involved at different stages. And it doesn't make sense to me to go, right, we just have one ChatGPT which does all of this. Because, to be honest, if I had an editor involved when I'm drafting a document the first time, I find that constraining. You want different, because the people around you kind of sit in your head in a little way, in the doll's house of your mind, and they change the way you think. So by embodying AI's different abilities into different personas that you can have at different moments, I find that a more productive way, perhaps, of interacting with AI. And it also means once you start having them as different personas, it makes it more possible for them to kind of reach out and go, I can help with that, which is something that something like ChatGPT can't do.
You're also using AI in a lot, like in a research about humans, about the cognition, about how we approach text, about the literacy, and can you tell me a little bit about that, like how you approach it in your research?
I think one, like I said, like the thing that is fun with AI at the moment is kind of rolling your sleeves up and seeing what it feels like. And like I said, I've got this work with programmatic AI, but also with this kind of interaction thing. So at the moment, what I'm really enjoying is making AIs that I can interact with in different contexts, and then personally kind of seeing how that feels. Now, the big obstruction to doing that is that your preconceptions get in the way. And this is, a problem we're kind of thinking through making. So the question for me is not how do we experiment with interacting with AI, but how do we stop ourselves slotting it into existing ways of thinking? And I have a rather odd mechanism to do this, which is I dress my AIs up like other things. So to give you an example, what do we interact with as humans, which is not quite human, right? Non-human. Dogs, let's say, right? They are definitely smart. They're not us. Now, as it turns out, I didn't model my AI NPCs as dogs. I modeled them as dolphins. I have a weird obsession with dolphins. So dolphins, I don't know, like you kind of go back to the science fiction from the 60s and the 70s, and they were convinced that by now we would be talking with dolphins. Like not kidding, there were big experiments with John Lilly in the 70s. It's still true today. So 1/4 of the world's nuclear arsenal is protected even now by trained dolphins. Not kidding. Right? Okay. So we work a lot alongside dolphins anyway. In 1974, there was a wonderful piece of work by the architectural practice Ant Farm to make a dolphin embassy where would humans and non-humans meet. So I've been modeling my AIs on dolphins and my little cursors on the whiteboard you interact with in the version I didn't show today, because I thought it's kind of a hard thing to explain, right? They were all decorated with dolphins, and that's why the poems that they make in my demos are all poems that dolphins would write.
Uh-huh.
What I've found in doing this, I know it sounds absurd, but what happens when you do this is it bumps you out of going, oh, this is like a human colleague, or, oh, I'm interacting with ChatGPT. And it frees you up to go, how does this feel, in a very, very open way. And once I make those kind of prototypes, I'm able to zoom in on other moments of interaction and go, well, what is it like for an AI to say it can, this is a moment it can kind of interrupt. One of the things I discovered, by the way, because I've been prototyping with the cursors on a canvas, is that the distance of the cursor, the AI's cursor from mine, is really important. When it gets a bit closer, it's a bit like it leaning in, going like, I like lurking, like I have something to say. This is an idea in sociology called proxemics. I think Edward Hall, right? So proxemics becomes really important. And I don't think I would have realized that was important if at the time I'd been going, oh, these AIs have to, act exactly like humans, because I would have been obsessed with text, because I was having to think about dolphins, right? I was thinking about how can they express themselves in an embodied fashion instead. So yeah, you see this kind of, this playful exploration opens me up, or opens us up to find models which become useful kind of down the line.
And how do you transpose, like when you're playing with cursors, how do you transpose it on a touch, on a device, on a phone, or spatial computing? How do you think about that? It might be different logics, right? Yeah,
it's a really interesting problem, right? Because obviously we don't have cursors on smartphones. One of the things I find fascinating looking at demos at the Vision Pro is that it communicates your eye gaze very, very well. So if you look at the icons, they move slightly as you kind of look across them. So they are communicating the idea of gaze and attention in a way that we don't even have on smartphones. Now, one of the questions for me using Vision Pro, and I really want to try it in a social context, is that communicated to other users, or does it feel just too intimate? Is it too much to make visible what you're looking at? You're looking at an icon to other people. So I think, the cursor for me is a proxy for attention. It works really well on screen. Obviously doesn't work on smartphone. Might work on Vision Pro, or it might feel like somebody is looking inside your brain. I think, so this is one of those cases where the work I'm doing at the moment with AI NPCs on a web-based canvas is an excuse for me to build the technology that I can then use to translate into working with a text document, or working with a smartphone, or something else in the future. So all of these different, Lego bricks start combining together to allow exploring other areas.
And do you also have some sketch for the spatial computing, or for the spatial interface?
You know what? I spent my day yesterday downloading the SDK for Vision Pro to start kind of working with it. One of the things I find very interesting about embodied computing is not what you're looking at, but your peripheral vision. What's happening kind of around you. There's an idea from the 1960s, the idea of the map room, where you take a project and you put everything all over the walls, all the information, the current state of knowledge, and multiple people move around it together. And one of the advantages that's stated in the 60s of the map room is you can see where people are lingering, and you can maybe walk over them to have that conversation. So those are the things that I think I would want to explore with spatial computing, but I think it's possible to already explore them in physical space. By using things like, I don't know, my AI clock, for example, is something which exists in the corner of your vision. Can we start breaking computing out from behind the screen in one corner over an entire room? And there's a lot of commonality between that kind of vision of, ubiquitous computing in the real world and Apple's, spatial computing paradigm. But yeah, I've been downloading the SDKs. That's very much what I want to be working on next.
Already looking forward to see what it will be. The AI clock, you touched on it. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yeah, that is one of these slightly absurd hacks which has possibly got completely out of control. I came downstairs. Well, I have a little e-ink screen, e-ink screen on my shelf, which is a word clock, just plugged into a Raspberry Pi. It's been there for about 3 years, and I came downstairs one morning, and I was like, well, maybe this could be like ChatGPT telling me the time instead, and I could make it do a poem, a rhyming couplet for every single minute. Don't know why. Procrastination is probably I probably had much more serious things to do. It didn't take long to do. So I made it and I put it out on the internet, and it went crazy, ended up in the New York Times. On the verge, it went viral in Indian newspapers. And long story short, I've been talking to manufacturers and an incredible industrial design agency called Approach in London. And it's going to be on Kickstarter in a few weeks. But let me tell you one of the strange things about sitting in a room where there is a poem composed by AI every single minute. Because I have now observations about what the different AI models are like. So for example, GPT-3 uses better words, makes better poems, right? It's got a better vocabulary. ChatGPT, which is what I'm using, it's a bit insipid. Uses very easy rhymes, right? Tends to say the same thing, but it is 1/10 the cost, right? So there's a kind of a big benefit there. The second thing is it fibs, right? So sometimes it will tell me the time, it's 11:42, that's the time, something, time to shine. I remember specifically it was not 11:42, right? It was fibbing in order to make for a good poem. So that's like one of the other things the AI does. The thing which I think is significant is I'm looking at these times every single minute, and they are high vibes. Often the poems are like, don't waste time. Go out and seize the day, right? It's really odd. I'm not kidding. I didn't put this into the prompt, but it's like hanging out with a small 15 centimeter LinkedIn influencer, right? Telling me to go on and get on with my day. It's weird. And what I ask myself is, where is that coming from? Right. Facebook did a piece of research which was unethical years ago, where they changed the semantic content of the newsfeed. So they took the newsfeed and they did semantic analysis on all the posts of your friends, and they skewed it so that an audience who they didn't tell would see more negative posts, just a little, and another audience that would see more positive posts. And then what they did is they measured the mood of the unwitting participants to see what the response would be. And no kidding, the people who are exposed to more negative sentiment act in a more negative way, the people in a more positive way. Facebook should not have done that experiment. But given they did, we know, or of course we knew already, but now we have it confirmed, that the sentiment of what you're exposed to or what you consume affects you in here. 100 million people a day were using ChatGPT on, by the end of February this year. I don't know what the numbers are now, but people are using products that are derived from it. All of its completions have this high vibes, go get it output. They're all like, every single word is a little mini Sam Altman whispering in your ear, you can do it, we should go and do this. And what's that doing to us? Maybe the right thing to do isn't to go out and be like gung-ho, go get it, you can do that thing. Maybe the right thing to do is sit down and spend time with your family, or to think about what's going on, or to interrogate what's happening. But we're all exposed to this vibe without being aware that we're being exposed to this vibe. And I think as a society, we should be talking about how these models are trained and what they're doing to us when we use them. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying it should be part of the discourse. And that was something I learned unexpectedly from having this weird hacked AI clock on my shelf.
And probably the last question. So is it motivating you, this bias of the AI?
Possibly, right? I hadn't thought of that. I will say that the AI boom at the moment, to me, reminds me a lot of the mid to late 90s, when the web came and we didn't know what would happen with it, right? Most technology, S-curves, you go through this kind of period of things opening up, and then the ramp, and then, the top end, like we are with smartphones at the moment, just eking out the last kind of changes. And in that early bit, the way you figure things out is your imagination bottleneck. So you have to you get your hands dirty, you let your body and your feelings and conversations and artists and designers tell you what to do. And that was what the late 90s was like. And I haven't felt that again until now. So yes, I find it incredibly motivational. But maybe it's because I'm just spending too much time on ChatGPT and it's telling me what to think. I hadn't thought about that, but thank you very much.
Oh, thank you also very much, Matt. It was incredible, and thanks for everybody who is watching this show. Matt Webb, was a pleasure. Go on a interconnect on your blog, and thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks.